Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Congresswoman Paulina Luna. Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming back on.
Glad to be back.
Busy week, but let's start with news from Wednesday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed a joint session of Congress. While he was walking in, I saw you shook his hand. You also posted a photo with him on social media. So were you able to talk to him? What was meeting him like?
Yeah, I actually talked to him a few times, and honestly, he's really funny. I just told him first time meeting him, I said, God bless you and everything that you're doing. But when I was able to chat with him on the floor, I talked with him a little bit about his KFC comment, and I mean, he seems like he has a very good energy, very mellow.
He did have a very strong energy. He gave a really impassioned speech that was almost an hour long. What did you make of his remarks to Congress?
I think that they were right on. And the one thing that I really appreciated is that, and I actually stood up and clapped when he said it, is he said, we're not asking America to put boots on the ground. And I respect that, being a veteran, especially with my foreign policy stance and perspective. So I appreciated it.
During the speech, your colleague, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, she held up a sign that said war criminal on one side and guilty of genocide on the other. And there were reports that you then went over to sit next to her, and there was some sort of confrontation. A, was there? And B, can you bring us to that moment?
I don't really like to divulge private conversations on the floor, but what I will say is that, there's a time and a place to make your voices known and heard. And on the floor, we actually do expect a certain level of decorum. So we're not supposed to have signs, and we're definitely not supposed to be making protest or political statements at that time. But, she did, if you saw in that exchange, did put this sign down briefly, and I appreciate that. But I also am just going to further say this, and that I think right now what you're seeing is a lot of tensions, especially in the Middle East, and with good foreign policy, especially foreign policy under a future President Trump administration. I think that those tensions will subside, and I'm hoping that eventually what's happening in Israel will stop. And so I think her and I both share that same sentiment.
And you did talk about foreign policy at the RNC last week. I will get to that in a moment. But former Speaker Nancy Pelosi was not a fan of Netanyahu's speech. She did make a statement on X. She posted this, quote, Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation in the House chamber today was by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the United States. Many of us who love Israel spend time today listening to Israeli citizens whose families have suffered in the wake of the October 7th Hamas terror attack and kidnappings. These families are asking for a ceasefire deal that will bring the hostages home, and we hope the Prime Minister will spend his time achieving that goal. What do you make of her statement?
Well, her own party can't agree on the position of Israel, or if Israel's even a country. You have a massive movement within the Democrat Party that refuses to acknowledge Israel and is actually promoting, I would say, organizations as well as people that are sympathizers to Hamas. And so it was ironic because you had a number, I think 20 Democrats didn't show up, but then also half of the Democrat delegation was actually standing up and applauding Netanyahu. So I think that it was a terrible foreign policy blunder that she didn't show up for this, and then that she would choose to use that time to really attack Netanyahu. But again, Nancy Pelosi also said that, if illegals don't come here, who's going to pick the crops? So I'm not surprised.
Like I said, you spoke at the RNC last week in Milwaukee, praising former President Donald Trump. A lot of those speeches centered around 4 more years of Biden, way worse than an additional 4 years of Trump. But now there is no Biden. He dropped out of the race on Sunday. So what's A, your reaction to that news? And B, how does the Republican Party's message change now that the likely nominee is Kamala Harris?
Yeah, so I'm actually very concerned that Biden is even still in the White House, and I've actually publicly called for his resignation, because if he's not fit to seek re-election, which is what every Democrat was saying, then he's not fit to be in office. And again, I've been, I think, talking about this for a while. I do believe that there's serious cognitive issues, and I also share that same sentiment with other Democrats that did not support Biden's re-election. So I definitely think he shouldn't be in the office. But, my second perspective, and I guess answering your question, is I don't really think that those policy changes change at all, mainly because what we've found is that there's been a heavy-handed influence from the Barack Obama administration in Biden's administration, and Kamala Harris was there with him every step of the way. But what I will say is personally, I have had interactions with Kamala Harris. And what I can tell you, and I actually just addressed this with reporters outside the Capitol, is for a woman that champions the fact that she is a minority, I'm also a minority woman, but she has done nothing for Hispanic women and children that have been trafficked at the U.S.-Mexico border, because the Democrat Party has really used this open border talking point in an effort to sway Hispanic American voters, which are now the largest voting minority in the country. And so, their open border policies are hurting all Americans, specifically the Black communities, specifically the Hispanic communities. And yet, if you criticize her for, doing anything about that, if you're not a minority yourself, they call you racist. And so I will be very critical of her on her foreign policy, on her border perspective, and her failure to secure the border.
So let's talk about Harris first. You said you had interactions with her. What have those been like, and if they were one-on-one?
I actually had one very well-known and actually documented and filmed interaction with her, where I ran into her at the airport back in, I think it was 2017 or 2016 when she was running. But what I will, or excuse me, several years ago when she was running. But the point is that she actually, I guess because I'm younger, she asked me if I wanted a selfie. And I didn't want a selfie. I wanted to talk to her about what was happening with women and children at the border. And she completely, the minute I wanted to ask her questions, and mind you, at that time, I wasn't elected to office. She actually tried to pawn me off on a staffer, and she refused to answer those questions. And honestly, her staffer got pretty aggressive. And so I just think that she's one of those people that can't answer for her own actions and her decisions. And as a person who prides herself on being a prosecutor, it's really, really sad that she had this position, bipartisan, to be able to help women and children, and she didn't.
I know you said earlier you have concerns about President Biden's cognitive abilities. He did address the nation from the White House last night. Did you catch those remarks, and what did you think?
Yeah, I caught the remarks, and again, he went back to the same rhetoric that I think was responsible for getting President Trump almost assassinated. Again, this whole threat to democracy tone, and I think underlying message, and that this is really an important decision, and if democracy is on the line, right? They like to say that. But I think either which way, Biden himself, his own family, the party decided that he should not seek re-election, and yet they're still trying to say and pawn him off as if he's capable of making decisions moving forward in our country, and I just don't think that that's the case. And so he used his position and platform to get behind Kamala Harris, but what I will also tell you is it still seems like there's people within the party that don't want Kamala Harris, and that's why you're seeing, I think, them actually, what are they, phoning in the delegates, and so they're trying to prevent there from being any controversy with another pick. And so, look, moving forward, whether it's Kamala Harris, whether it's Gavin Newsom, whoever it is, the polling is still showing in our favor. President Trump just literally took a bullet for democracy in his own words. He's been tried and tested on foreign policy, and frankly, I don't want someone in the White House who's going to laugh their way through foreign policy.
And going back to President Biden, if you don't think he's fit to serve right now, and he doesn't step down, which, he didn't last night, do you think that the 25th Amendment should be invoked?
Most certainly. In fact, what I'm hearing is that is actually what his cabinet used to threaten him to drop out of the presidential.
Who are you hearing that from?
Yeah, I'm actually hearing that from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
So Democratic members of the House are saying that the 25th Amendment was threatened to get President Biden to step down.
That's the rumor mill, yes.
Interesting. And I have to ask, obviously, are there any names to those people?
Can't do that.
Got it. I do want to go back now to the RNC. Arguably one of the biggest pieces of news to come out of the event was that President Trump did pick his running mate, and that is Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. What do you think of that choice?
I think JD has an incredible story, and that's the American dream story, and that's exactly why he is such a lethal running mate and threat to, I think, the narrative that the left has really tried to paint Republicans as, that, they try to say that we're big corporation, big business, when in actuality we actually are working for the common man. So JD's story is very relatable for most people that haven't had it easy. And, I think that he has an incredible family, and I look forward to being on the campaign trail with both him and President Trump.
Congresswoman, I know you and I have talked a lot about reproductive issues on this program. J.D. Vance has been getting pilloried for past comments he's made. He said before that it doesn't make sense that Democrats who are, quote, childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives are leaders in this country because they don't really have a, quote, direct stake in it. And this has deeply offended women on both sides of the aisle. Even Jennifer Aniston weighed in. What do you make of those remarks?
You know, I probably would say that for those people that get offended on certain comments, yet will sit there and call Republican, domestic terrorists, say that people should be attack them every step of the way. I think that this is the double standard that politics will try to use to sway people to not get them to vote for example, J.D. Vance and Trump ticket. But I'll also put this out there in that what I'm hearing from the Trump campaign is that he is going to be great on issues like IVF. And I think he's made his position very blatantly known, especially on Roe v. Wade, and that it is a states' rights decision. So as you're seeing, the pivoting talking point for Kamala Harris and the Democrats are going to try to paint Republicans as anti-woman. So they'll take quotes like that. They won't show the policy or the perspective backing it. But I'm sure J.D. Vance will be on a tour as well. And as you're seeing, he has incredible support from his own wife, who's a very accomplished attorney, family woman. And so I look forward to seeing how they're going to be messaging on that as well.
Congresswoman, per usual, I'm always appreciative of our conversations. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.